Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to today's morning blast. It is Thursday, the 26th of June, all day. You join me and the magnificent Mr. Michael Brown for a preview of yesterday, a review of today, maybe put a smile on your face, maybe give you a bit of value. Who knows? Anything's possible. But before we do crack on, I will get the legals out the way. So as usual, nothing discussed in this space. This session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ. That of myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed that of Michael Brown. Michael, how are you, my dear friend?
Very good morning to you, Ryan. Good morning to everyone else, apart from Zach Eisman, who called me a very rude word earlier.
Oh, yes, no, I did see that. Well, yeah, to be fair, I think you had it coming.
Surprised it's only him, to be honest.
Yeah, to be fair, the day's still young, right?
Yeah, it's true.
In a change to scheduled programming, where we've recently been giving Iranian headlines, or getting them out of the way, first, there are none. No news is good news. So
Brilliant.
I'm happy for you to crack on.
Right, we can return to normal then, can't we? And I think you're absolutely right. Markets do seem to have drawn a line under the situation in the Middle East, for the time being at least, touch wood, it seems, relatively stable. Sorry, I was just distracted. Man walking past me in a pink shirt with shorts on, which is an absolutely disgraceful outfit to be wearing in an office. Anyway, besides that, where are markets this morning? I guess it's very much been a case of more of the same over the last 24 hours or so. Equities continuing to grind higher and the dollar continuing to grind lower. Although the S&P 500 ended the day practically unchanged yesterday, we have seen the front S&P future contract grind up to a fresh record high in early trade this morning. And the Nasdaq also continuing to move higher and trading at record highs itself. And on a stock specific basis, for the benefit of Tom, if he's listening in this morning, Nvidia traded to its first record close yesterday for the first time since January.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Indeed. In terms of markets elsewhere, as I said, the dollar continuing to drift lower, with the dollar index trading at its lowest level since April of 2022. Cable is trading north of 137 this morning, trading to multi-year highs, and the euro has reclaimed the 117 mark. And this comes as capital really just continues to leave the United States. Markets becoming increasingly jittery around what's going on with the Fed and the idea of monetary policy independence. Stateside, again, President Trump attacking, quite, and that is waning very, very significantly. Trump attacking Powell once again yesterday at the NATO summit, of all places. Not entirely sure that's the venue to be doing things.
Well, to be fair, we did say in yesterday's show that obviously NATO's going on, Trump's going to be there, so expect headlines from Trump,
absolutely.
And not necessarily anything to do with NATO. So, I think we called that.
We did. We should give ourselves a pat on the back for that one. Yeah. Trump was also saying that he has 3 or 4 people that he will pick from to become the next Fed chair. Of course, the new Fed chair's term will not start until May of next year. Trump also saying that he has begun to interview some of those candidates. We then had reporting out via the Wall Street Journal overnight saying that Trump is considering naming the next Fed chair early, potentially in September or October. Again, this is something that we've both discussed at some length, this idea of a shadow Fed chair and Trump trying to essentially massage market expectations by getting the new guy in the media to essentially promise what he's going to do as soon as he officially gets his hands on the levers of power.
But will it lead to a happy ending?
Well, only time will tell on that front, I suppose. In terms of the names in the fray, Trump is reportedly considering Kevin Warsh, who has been rumoured for quite some time, a pick that I just don't understand because he was an uber hawk when he was actually on the Fed board back after the GFC. So maybe he's undergone a Damascene conversion to Dove as well. Other names, word. Indeed. Other names in the fray include NEC Director Kevin Hassett, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, David Malpass, who ran the World Bank when Trump was first in power back in 2017, but has never made a monetary policy decision in his life. And of course, the last pick potentially in the fray is Chris Waller, the Fed governor who went from hawk to dove on CNBC on Friday. So of course, we will see what happens with that one. I'm not sure there's much new in those reports from the Wall Street Journal, in all honesty. It is more just a sort of confirmation of what we were expecting to happen anyway. UK. And I think the sort of vibe I get from markets at the moment is it's a market that doesn't really need an excuse to be selling the dollar. The path of least resistance seems to point towards a continued slow but steady weakening in the greenback. And these reports just kind of strengthen the case for that in all honesty. Away from the Fed, other bits and bobs from yesterday, we did have a fair few headlines on the trade front. We heard from Steve Moran, who runs the CEA, the Council of Economic Advisors. He was saying that he is optimistic on trade talks before the 9th of July and optimistic on a flurry of trade frameworks being announced before that tariff deadline. Kevin Hassett, the NEC director, was saying similar, noting that there will be, and I quote, a lot of trade deals after the tax bill passes, and that trade deals will come, quote, sooner rather than later. Just a reminder, Kevin Hassett has been saying that for at least 7 weeks now, and a deal
90% done.
exactly, and a deal hasn't actually arrived. So we'll see how that one pans out. I won't be holding my breath.
No.
Also, sticking with trade, again, going back to Trump at the NATO summit, he was saying that Spain will be penalised in trade talks. So this comes back to what we were saying, I think, last week, where everyone else in NATO has gone, OK, we'll spend 5% of GDP on defence. Spain have turned around and gone, we're not doing that. We're going to stay at 2%, which to say it's gone down like a lead balloon in Washington, D.C. is probably an understatement.
I do feel for Spain, because all they've done is told the truth. Whereas you've got other countries going, we'll boost to 5, but we're going to use creative accounting to get there. Spain have gone, well, we can't.
Well, and also they do have a point. If you read what the Spaniards are saying, they're basically saying that one, they don't see the point in committing to a huge arbitrary increase because it will just lead to effectively spending for the sake of spending, which it probably will. And the second thing they're saying is that we will increase spending, but just not by that magnitude, because they believe, and I'm no expert in this by any stretch, but they believe they can achieve the same capabilities as other NATO members by spending less.
Yeah, well, two things on this, which I think is worth mentioning, is one, it's a very easy way increasing military spending across NATO is a very easy way to get people to buy more American-made goods due to how prominent the military industrial complex is in the US. So that's one. That's the main reason Trump's doing this. Be honest. Secondly, what point you just mentioned there is something that our good friend Polemic Payne mentioned, where in terms of when we're talking about benchmarks, in terms of spending and stuff, it shouldn't really be benchmarks in terms of dollar amounts or in terms of monetary amounts, because as we've seen before, as we heard last week, the UK are basically improving broadband infrastructure to around the UK and label it as defence. Well, that doesn't increase our troops on the ground or what our commitment to NATO is. So the whole kind of how things are benchmarked is completely arse over tit, really. And you would kind of assume that it should be commitments from NATO nations to be able to kind of ready X amount of troops or ready X amount of munitions, rather than just kind of just an arbitrary figure.
You're absolutely right, but this requires a depth of thinking that I don't think Trump is able to comprehend. So that's why we end
anyone
up with
in NATO, by the sounds of it.
Well, yeah, which is why we end up with these arbitrary numbers. What Trump was saying, just going back to that, was that Spain is terrible, I think was the exact quote from him. He was also saying that they will be penalised and they will have to pay double in trade talks. Now, what I can't understand here, and what Trump seems to have forgotten, is he's not negotiating with Spain, he's negotiating with the EU. So does that mean that this is a completely empty threat that can't be implemented, or does it mean that the entire EU is going to have to pay double whatever the tariff may have been? Well, I have no idea, to be honest, but it's certainly one to watch.
And again, on this, it's another issue with the member states having different preferences and Trump liking certain member states more than others, and in general hating the EU as a whole. We know he's got a massive thing for Italy and Meloni, and then on the other side, on the flip side, we also know that Germany's Merz is getting really pissed off with how the EU are handling negotiations because he says it's too complicated. So there's a lot of fractions. It's very fractious.
It is. It is indeed. So yes, that's certainly one to watch. In terms of other trade headlines from yesterday, Vietnam, they said that they expect good results in US trade talks sooner than 2 weeks. Well, given that the pause expires in 2 weeks, that's kind of stating the obvious. We also heard from the Swiss yesterday, the Swiss saying that they expect US tariffs to remain at 10% after the 9th of July. Their finance minister was saying that she spoke with Scott Bessent on Monday, and I quote again here, the delay in a US trade deal is not our fault being the Swiss. So we will see what happens on that front. The Swiss president was also talking yesterday saying that the US has acknowledged that Switzerland is not a manipulator of its FX rate, which is complete and utter nonsense because that's all
They
the
are.
SNB do these days. Finally, on trade yesterday, moving to China, apparently Beijing and the government there have asked rare earth mineral firms for information about their staff. They are essentially trying to prevent trade secrets from leaking out of China. They have asked for all sorts of information on the experts working on rare earths, and they've even asked some to turn in their passports. So nothing like
Always promising.
exactly. That sounds like a brilliant sign on that front. In terms of other factors from yesterday, we did have a 5-year Treasury sale from the United States that tailed when issued by 0.5 basis points, which isn't great, but we have seen a pretty significant rally in recent days, so maybe unsurprising. We also had the latest new home sales data out of the States yesterday. New home sales at 623,000 in the month of May, down from 743,000 in April and below the forecast range. If you listen to people in the Trump administration, of course, that is all the fault of Fed Chair Powell, which is complete and utter nonsense. Actually, on that note, I've forgotten the geezer's name now, but I'm sure you'll mention this in the crypto blast later. The chap who runs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, he is saying that they are now going to accept crypto as part of security against mortgages. So what could possibly go wrong on that
you know what?
front?
If I recall correctly, I believe we, I say myself and Cam, hello Cam, I can see him listening in. I've got a feeling Cam might have mentioned this yesterday, but yeah, absolutely more to chat about on that.
That proves that I wasn't listening yesterday, so we'll
There you
move
go.
very quickly on from that one. In M&A news, the Wall Street Journal reporting yesterday that Shell are apparently in early talks to acquire BP. The Wall Street Journal said that these talks are active and that BP are considering the approach carefully. Shell have very quickly come out and denied this, saying no takeover talks are taking place and that they have no intention of making an offer for BP. That doesn't mean that talks haven't taken place in the past. I think the wording is very careful on that one.
Yeah.
And also, we on a similar footing, we heard from CNBC citing sources yesterday, noting that BP would be unlikely to be sold in its entirety, and that if any sale does take place, that it is likely to be split up into its constituents. Of course, ADNOC out in Abu Dhabi had been rumoured to be interested in BP's gas unit previously, so certainly one to keep an eye on there. And lastly, just to wrap up with a couple of tech-related headlines. Firstly, from OpenAI yesterday, they have said that a company called Zhipu AI, Zhipu, who are apparently Chinese, they are aggressively courting governments in developing countries, effectively aiming to embed Chinese AI systems in those countries.
What could possibly
ahead of
go
their
wrong?
Western rivals. Well, exactly. And also, yeah, we saw this previously with physical infrastructure. You know, you look at the whole Belt and Road thing around Africa, and the Western world was kind of asleep at the wheel, and it looks like we're all asleep at the wheel once again. And last but by no means least, the Morning Blast's favourite stock, Pony AI. They were added to the Nasdaq Golden Dragon China Index yesterday, according to the firm. This makes Pony AI the only company dedicated to autonomous driving in the benchmark index, and the stock was up by about 15% on the back of that. So very much riding off into the sunset there.
Oh, God. I would love to know what Pony AI stock is up since we both joked that we should get long, but just purely on the name.
I'd rather not know.
Yeah, I'd rather not know, to be fair. I'd rather not know. Michael, thank you very much. As is usual, I will now read off some of the choice headlines from the Overnight News Roundup, which is compiled by the awesome Zach Eisman. Do follow him, do follow and subscribe to our Substack to get all of the headlines you might have missed while you were sleeping sent directly to your inbox. So starting off in trade, China adds fentanyl precursors to controlled list, raising hopes for tariff relief. Obviously, because we know fentanyl the fentanyl tariff makes up a significant chunk of that. China added 2 precursors to its controlled chemicals list starting July 20th, seen as key to addressing the fentanyl issue. A US government source suggests this could lead to lifting the 20% tariff that's assigned to fentanyl, signaling potential progress in US-China trade relations. That's gone to Reuters. Trump's tax retaliation proposal faces removal if global deal is reached. A tax proposal allowing Trump to retaliate, I can't read today, against countries with, quote, unfair taxes may be dropped from the US budget bill if an international agreement is secured. That's gone to White House and congressional Republicans.
The
Japan.
chances of an international tax agreement being secured
Oh
anytime
God!
soon are
You remember
nil.
last year when everyone was saying, no, it was possibly 2 years now when Yellen was involved and all that. Everyone was adamant that we were going to have a global tax. It's like behave.
It's just never going to happen, is it?
No, exactly. Japan, they've rejected the US's 25% auto tariff, continued trade talks. So we're now it'll be the 28th meeting, the next one that comes up. No, actually that's a lie. I think jokes aside, I think it'll be the 19th or the 20th. Japan's trade negotiator, Akazawa, reiterated opposition to the US's proposed 25% auto tariff, with talks ongoing but no deadline set. They're currently eyeing July the 9th is the key date until that can is kicked. EU faces trade deal dilemma with the US. EU leaders will decide on Thursday, today, whether to pursue a quick trade deal with the US, potentially favouring Washington's terms, or escalate tensions for better long-term outcomes. We all know how impossible the EU to find it is, how impossible it is for the EU to come up with quick decisions, so be interested to see what they come up with here. In macro, US Treasury extends debt ceiling measures to July 24th. Another can is kicked. Treasury Secretary Bezant extended the extraordinary cash management measures to avoid breaching the federal debt ceiling, pushing the deadline to July 24th. That's from Reuters. Tokyo apartment rents surge at the fastest pace in 30 years. Rising apartment rates in Tokyo, the fastest in 3 decades, signal deepening inflation trends, providing the Bank of Japan with evidence of broader economic price pressures. China, they're confident of mitigating external shocks. That's gone to State Planner. Chinese official expressed confidence in minimizing adverse impacts from external shocks through robust policy measures, reinforcing economic resilience. Sticking with China, China's premier pushes consumption-led growth model. Premier Li emphasized reforms to shift China towards a consumption-driven economy, positioning it as the world's top growth driver. That's according to Reuters. Again, sticking with China, they overtake Australia as the top lithium miner by 2026. Apparently, that's on the cards according to Reuters. China is forecast to surpass Australia as the world's leading lithium miner by next year, with dominance expected to grow through 2035, despite unprofitable producers. You know, who needs profit, I guess. Geopolitical news, no Iranian headlines as mentioned this morning. Touch wood, ceasefires seem to be holding. But Greenland miner Amarak attracts state-backed interest amid Trump focus. Amaroq Minerals, Greenland's largest miner, is in talks with state-backed agency as Trump political spotlight drives investor interest in strategic resources. Equities now, so just a few from here. We've got 4 from here before I hand back to you in the studio. Micron surges on AI-driven memory demand, strong guidance. Micron Technologies reported significant sales and earnings leaped fueled by AI-driven memory demand with above consensus guidance. Shares rose 7% after hours before settling at up 1%. Meta, they are poaching OpenAI talent for superintelligence push. This is a story we've kind of been mentioning a couple of times now on the show. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg recruited 3 OpenAI researchers to bolster his superintelligence efforts, aiming to navigate the company's AI challenges. This is according to Wall Street Journal. Those that have been listening in or also doing their own research may remember that OpenAI Sam Altman last week basically said that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta as a whole are giving signing on bonuses of up to and around $100 billion to people we can poach from OpenAI. If we've got no evidence so far if that is the case, but that's a lot of money.
So all right for some, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. And our new favourite brand, Mars Kellanova. Their $36 billion deal has been cleared by the FTC, but still faces EU scrutiny. No shock there. The US FTC approved Mars Inc.'s $36 billion acquisition of Kellanova, aka Kellogg's, while the EU launched a lengthy probe into the snack giant deal. And finally, from me, H&M post strong profit signals turnaround success. H&M, the fashion retailer, reported better than expected profits driven by cost control and demand for women's fashion and sportswear, marking progress in CEO Daniel Evers' turnaround strategy. Actually, before I hand back to you, I've got a question for you because this came
Go
up
on.
in yesterday's grain market blast I did with Angie. And we were talking about how obviously we got this trade deadline coming, and are we going to just see another massive can kicked or whatever? I put it to Angie, and so I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this. That if no deals are made, so say the US hasn't got any real deal with China, hasn't got any real deal with with India, who else? What, Vietnam? All these big names that we're looking for, Japan, etc., South Korea. Then we're more likely, if there's no decent deals made, we're more likely to see just a massive can kicked. However, my working theory is that if Trump and the administration have got deals across the line, or at least deals on paper across the line, or like kind of ideas on paper across the line with South Korea, with China, with Japan, with India, but say they haven't got anything in motion with the EU, in this case, the EU are probably going to be the laggards in getting any deal done. I think there's more of a chance that because they've done deals with everyone else, Trump will use that as an example and say, well, look, we've managed to do deals with everyone but the EU. We're not going to kick the can for the EU. They're going to be paying up. What are your thoughts on that? So do you see what I mean?
I
So
think that's a decent assumption to use. I think.
almost like
I would
if we need to kick the can for everyone, we will. But if there's only a couple of countries that haven't pulled their finger out, they're going to lump it and see.
I would caveat that though by saying that yes, I can
You can
work with
see
that
it, right?
assumption, but if for example you do end up in a situation where the EU get slapped with that 50% tariff on the 9th of July, I reckon it would be in place for 48 hours at most before there's a Truth Social post of von der Leyen has promised to come to Washington DC and
Oh
hurry
no,
things along,
absolutely.
etc., etc., etc. So
No,
yeah,
yeah,
I can
absolutely.
see that happening, but I can also see if there was any sort of market shock on the back of that, then I can't imagine it being particularly prolonged because
Oh no, absolutely.
they
I
would just
think
cave straight away.
you'd be glued to PIQ waiting for the headline to follow up to kind of walk it back. But you can see my thinking here, right? Either kick the
Yeah,
can for
no,
everyone,
absolutely.
or you're gonna just you're gonna let people suffer.
Yeah, it depends whether the big deals are anywhere near
Yeah,
being done, and
yeah,
something
exactly
like
that.
Japan doesn't look like they're making any progress at all
No,
at this point.
no,
So
true.
we will see what happens. Anyway, in terms of today, it is really all about the US because the data docket throughout the European morning is pretty barren. In terms of those figures out of the States, at 1:30 this afternoon, we have the final read on Q1 GDP that is expected unrevised, pointing to a quarterly contraction of minus 0.2% on an annualized basis. We'll also get all of the various PCE metrics as well, but of course remember that this is data for January to March. It is very, very stale at this point. Other US releases at 1:30 include the latest durable goods orders numbers. Orders set to rise by 8.5% in May. That's compared to the minus 6.3% fall that we saw in the month of April. I say this every month, but durable goods orders, it is at this point basically a reflection of Boeing orders. And given that Boeing signed an order for about 200 odd planes with Qatar in the month of May, it's no surprise that we're likely to see that figure inflated. And lastly, at 1:30 this afternoon, we have the weekly jobless claims numbers. Initial claims expected at 243,000 in the week to the 21st of June. That would be broadly unchanged from last time out. Continuing claims, that figure is expected at 1.95 million, up for a prior 1.945 million. And do, of course, just bear in mind that that continuing claims print coincides with the June non-farm payrolls survey week. Other things to focus on today, we have the latest pending home sales data out of the US at 3, and then 7-year supply at 6 o'clock this evening, forgive me. That rounding out this week's slate of Treasury auctions. In terms of speakers, we hear from 5 FOMC members, Barkin, Daly, Hammock, Barr and Cash Kashkari set to make remarks throughout the day today. We're also due to hear from the ECB President Christine Lagarde and BOE Governor Andrew Bailey as well. And last but by no means least, notable earnings today after the market close come from Nike, and we will see whether they can
Oh,
swoosh
stop
higher
it.
in after-hours trade.
Oh, fantastic. I wasn't expecting swoosh. I was expecting something else, but no, still well played, well played.
I've got to keep you
Michael,
on your toes, mate.
well, yeah, quite. Michael, thank you as always for being your wonderful self. Listeners, again, same goes for you. Thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate you and all the positive feedback you give on this. We don't want to hear any negative feedback, to be fair.
Yeah, keep that to yourself.
Yeah, keep that to yourself. Everyone, whatever you're doing today, keep it tight, stay safe. Much love, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.
Bye for now.